I was 8 months pregnant at midnight. My phone rang. The police officer said, "Your husband is in the hospital and he isn't alone." I drove there immediately. Hi everyone! Welcome back to the Her Vengeance channel. Today I have a completely new story for you. Being 8 months pregnant at 11:47 p.m., I received a call from the police. "Your husband is in the hospital. He's not alone. We found him with another woman." I drove there in the dead of night, surrounded by an eerie, unsettling silence. When I arrived, the doctor looked at me and said, "Ma'am, what you are about to see might shock you." He pulled back the hospital curtain. But I already knew exactly what I was going to face. What they didn't know was that I had spent exactly 6 months preparing meticulously for this exact moment. I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, leave a comment and let me know what city or state you're watching from right now. I love knowing who is in this room with me. A quick disclaimer. This story contains fictionalized elements woven in for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is coincidental, but the message behind it is 100% real. I was embroidering my son's name on white onesies when the phone rang. 1:47 p.m. Friday. The last peaceful moment of my life. The nursery smelled of fresh paint and cedarwood, exactly how new beginnings should smell. I spent 3 weeks getting that scent just right. I had rolled 2 coats of warm gray paint onto the walls. A cedar chest I restored myself sat against the opposite wall. And a mobile with hand-carved wooden birds rotated slowly over the crib every time warm air blew from the vent. Everything in this room had been chosen with utter premeditation. The way you select things when you understand that the details of a child's first world shape how they will perceive every world that follows. I was sitting in the nursing chair, a cream linen rocker I found at an estate sale in an old Virginia Highland mansion, and reupholstered myself. My feet rested on the matching ottoman, the onesies spread across my lap. My belly was massive by then. 8 months along, round, heavy, and strangely beautiful in the lamplight. I had learned to balance objects on it the way others use a nightstand. A small hoop rested against the curve of my stomach while my hands pushed the needle through the white cotton-shaping blue thread into the name Dashiell. I hadn't even told Thaddeus the name yet. The lamp on the dresser cast a honeyed glow over the room. Outside the windows, Buckhead was doing what it usually did on a Friday night in October. It sat in a quiet, affluent bubble behind stone walls and old magnolias detached from the hustle of the rest of Atlanta. We lived in one of the older homes on the street, a pre-war estate that Thaddeus had insisted on purely for the prestigious zip code. Over time, I had grown to love the wide front porch, the ancient oak in the yard, and how the morning light sliced cleanly into the kitchen. I was ready to stop loving it. I had been preparing for a lot of things, actually. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I didn't look at caller ID before answering. It was a habit I rarely thought about until that moment. The voice on the other end was male, composed, carrying that specific indifference of someone trained to deliver terrible news without blinking. "Mrs. Vance." A short pause. "This is Officer Callahan with the Atlanta Police Department. I apologize for calling at this hour." I carefully set the onesies aside and straightened up in the rocker. My free hand drifted instinctively to the curve of my belly, a reflex I developed in the second trimester and never dropped. "I'm listening," I said. "Your husband, Thaddeus Vance, was found this evening at a residential address in Midtown. A fire broke out in the unit. He was transported to Emory University Hospital. He's being treated for smoke inhalation and minor burns, but the attending physician states his condition is stable. We were asked to notify his next of kin." I waited. Something in the way he chose his words was carefully measured, a harbinger that the worst was yet to come. "What caused the fire?" I asked. The pause was brief, precise. "We are still determining that, ma'am, but I must inform you that your husband was not alone in the condo. A woman was present. She was also transported to the ER. I would encourage you to come to the hospital as soon as you can. He was not alone." I let those 4 words hang in the air of the nursery. They didn't surprise me at all. That was what I would think about later, driving through the dark, that my first reaction wasn't shock. It was something quieter, like the final piece of a very long, exhausting jigsaw puzzle snapping into place. "Can you give me the address?" I asked. "The unit where he was found, the Peachtree Residences, Unit 14F. I knew that address perfectly well. I had known it for 3 months since the afternoon. A trusted associate slid a piece of paper across a cafe table and told me, devoid of emotion, that Thaddeus was renting a furnished luxury condo there. Under an LLC he registered nearly 2 years ago. I never confronted Thaddeus about it. I never breathed a word to anyone else besides that one man. I was waiting for the right moment, and ever since I had been quietly, meticulously preparing for it. Thank you, Officer Callahan, I said. My voice was entirely level. I had practiced this composure the way some people, driven by necessity and iron discipline, learn a second language until it ceases to require any effort. I'll be there shortly. I hung up and sat motionless for a long moment. The wooden birds above the crib turned slowly to their unhurried rhythm. The lamp hummed faintly. My son moved inside me, a long, rolling movement, exactly the kind that had been waking me from sleep for weeks. And then, as if understanding something, he grew still. I pushed myself up from the rocker the way you learn to do at 8 months pregnant, leaning heavily on one arm and letting gravity work with you instead of against you. As soon as I stood, the familiar ache in my lower back flared up, a dull, persistent throb that had been my constant companion for 6 weeks. I breathed through it. I had gotten quite good at breathing through things. I looked at the onesies one last time. The name was only half finished. The final letters were still just pencil sketches on cotton. Not yet thread, not yet real. I set it down on the chair, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, and took my purse. I didn't make a list. I didn't sit down to calm my nerves, nor did I call anyone to tell them where I was going. I had been calm for months. There was nothing left to arrange. Leaving the house, I didn't lock the door. I had something much more important to handle. 11 miles. That was all that separated me from the culmination of 6 months of careful, calculated preparation. I merged onto Georgia 400, without thinking, guided by muscle memory, choosing the route my body decided upon before my mind had to. Atlanta in October, at midnight, is beautiful in a specific way, with the skyline catching its own light, the wide interstate stretching before you in 2 clean lines of amber and white, while the rest of the city sinks into the silence, only arrives after the last neon signs go dark. I drove with both hands on the wheel, the radio off, and allowed my memory to return to where this all began. April. 6 months ago. It started the way it usually does in these situations, with something small enough to easily explain away. Thaddeus always kept his phone close. That was nothing new. He ran a group of luxury car dealerships employing 43 people across 2 metro locations, and his phone rang at all hours. In April, the placement of it changed. It stopped resting face up on the nightstand as it had for the 11 years of our marriage. It started landing face down, on every surface, in every room, every single time. A minor shift that another woman in another marriage might blame on stress or habit. But I noticed it. I filed it into a different category. Then came the receipts. Thaddeus was always meticulous with expense accounts for his dealerships. In the early years, we built the business together, and I knew the reporting system better than most of his employees. In May, gaps appeared. Dinners at restaurants I didn't recognize on nights he supposedly met with fleet buyers. A hotel bill in Alpharetta expensed as a manufacturers conference, which I checked took place that same weekend but in Savannah. A second phone line on the corporate account registered to a name I had never heard. The perfume was the final straw. Not an obvious cloud of scent, nothing that careless. Just a hint of something floral and foreign that I caught one Thursday evening as he hung his blazer in the hallway light. Subtle enough that he could assume I wouldn't notice. I had been married long enough to know that confrontation isn't always the strongest move you have. I called Gideon Sterling on a Tuesday morning in late April. I was sitting at a corner table in a Decatur coffee shop, while Thaddeus believed I was at a prenatal appointment across town. Gideon and I had studied corporate law together at Emory 15 years ago. After passing the bar, he went straight into financial crimes and asset recovery, the kind of practice that requires a surgical understanding of how people hide money funnel assets through shell companies and build parallel lives that, from a distance, look completely ordinary. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything I found. I told him what I suspected. I told him I was 7 months pregnant and that I needed absolute certainty before I said a single word to my husband, because once I spoke there would be no going back and I intended to be immovable when that moment came. Gideon called me back 11 days later. He's moving money, he said, not mincing words. That was something I learned to rely on with Gideon. He delivered information the way a good diagnostician delivers lab results clearly without unnecessary cruelty, but without sugarcoating it either. Corporate accounts, joint savings, and a new LLC he registered 18 months ago, under a name that isn't his. Whoever helped him set up this structure knows what they're doing. How much, I asked. Enough to severely impact any legal proceedings. I looked out the cafe window at the street for a moment. We need to move quickly, Serafina Gideon said, before the transfers are finalized. Not yet, I replied. First, I need the complete picture. Every account, every name, every transaction. I want everything in my hand before I make a single move. There was a silence then, he added. That's risky, Serafina. I know. I'm taking the risk consciously. What I hadn't told Gideon yet was that the financial trail wasn't the only thing I was working on. There were other patterns I was observing. A neighbor who seemed to know Thaddeus's schedule better than any neighbor should. Conversations that abruptly ended the moment I walked into a room. Minor rearrangements in the structure of my daily life that felt less like coincidences and more like precise choreography. I was still piecing it together. I needed more time. Here is what I learned from 14 years of building a business and a marriage from the ground up. The person who makes the first move rarely wins. The winner is the one who waits until they have everything. And I was waiting, and I almost had everything. Tension rippled across my abdomen without the slightest warning. A Braxton Hicks contraction. The practice runs my OBGYN Dr. Kensington told me would happen more frequently as my due date approached. Unlike real labor, these are painless rehearsals. It's just the body learning its own mechanics. I breathed through it exactly as Dr. Kensington taught me. Slow inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6. Shoulders consciously dropped. The tension peaked and released. Dashiell moved once and settled. I kept my hands on the wheel. I kept driving. Ahead, the massive blocks of Emory University Hospital loomed a sprawling complex of buildings and sky bridges. Brilliantly lit, even at this hour, because hospitals don't close, don't dim their lights, and don't stop for the mere mechanics of night. I was born in this hospital 43 years ago. Tonight, it would serve as the stage for something entirely different. My phone vibrated on the center console. A text from Gideon. Confirmed. It's her. Level 2. 3 sentences. 6 months of work compressed into a few words. I read it once, placed the phone face down ostentatiously the way Thaddeus never did, and pressed the gas. The automatic doors slid open before I even reached them. The ER entrance at Emory is slightly set back behind a circular drive, where ambulances cycle in and out regardless of the hour. Before tonight, I had walked through those doors exactly twice in my life, once with a broken wrist in law school and once to visit a coworker whose wife delivered 6 weeks early. Each time the building exuded that specific institutional calm that is not at all the same thing as a sense of relief or safety. Midnight hospitals have their own silence. Tense, as if everyone inside is holding their breath, waiting for news to fall one way or the other. The ER waiting room carried the universal scent of emergency wards bleach, layered over something older and more human, something no rigorous cleaning schedule can fully erase. The fluorescent lights flickered at a frequency that made everything look slightly flattened, like a photo taken with the wrong camera settings. I approached the front desk. The woman behind the glass had the practiced composure of someone who wrestled with every possible variation of nocturnal crisis and stopped being surprised years ago. Her badge read Maeve. "My husband was brought here earlier this evening," I said. The Deus Vance. Maeve's fingers danced across the keyboard without hesitation. "One moment." A quick glance at the screen. "He's in Bay, 14, C-Wing. Condition is stable under observation. The charge nurse will be right out. Thank you." I stepped away and stood by a rack of pamphlets about hypertension and flu shots surveying the room. A man in his 60s sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at a spot on the linoleum. A young woman in the farthest corner had fallen asleep sitting up. A boy, maybe 7, sat next to an older woman turning a toy car over and over in his hands. Everyone in this room was waiting for the resolution of someone's story. I was the only person whose story had already been resolved. I just hadn't announced it yet. Nurse Abernathy came through the secured doors 2 minutes later. A compact woman in her 40s with short graying hair and the efficient gait of someone who spent decades navigating tight corridors without wasting a step. She shook my hand and confirmed what Maeve had said. Thaddeus was in Bay 14 stable. He suffered minor injuries from the condo, fire smoke inhalation, and superficial burns along his right forearm. He was given a mild painkiller. He was conscious, though a bit groggy. "He's going to be fine," she said. The phrase carried the weight of a fact, stated precisely and frequently, not dismissively. "I'm glad to hear that," I replied. And then I asked a question to which I already knew the answer. I asked it the way you sometimes ask questions, not because you need the information, but because the asking itself is a performance you've decided to stage. The woman who came in with him. "Can you tell me anything about her condition?" Nurse Abernathy's expression didn't change, but something in it settled the way. A door settles into a frame when the latch quietly clicks. "I cannot provide information about another patient," she said. "HIPAA regulations and medical privacy laws prohibit us from disclosing the identity or health status of any patient to third parties, including family members of other patients. That applies regardless of the circumstances. For anyone wondering, medical privacy and HIPAA are among the most strictly enforced laws in American healthcare. It means even confirming whether a specific person is in the hospital can be a violation of federal law. Nurse Abernathy wasn't brushing me off. She was doing exactly what the law required. Of course, I said. I completely understand. I really did understand, and I didn't actually need her to tell me anything. I had known the woman's name for 3 months. I knew it the way you know something, you carry very carefully. Like a word you've kept on the tip of your tongue for a long time but haven't spoken aloud. What I didn't let Nurse Abernathy see was the bizarre discipline required to stand in that corridor, playing the concerned wife and worried mother-to-be, while simultaneously being the exact same woman who spent half a year ensuring this night would not catch her off guard. There is something exhaustingly precise about playing a role you've outgrown. I was very good at it. I had to be. Dr. Gallagher arrived a few minutes later. The attending ER physician, a lean man in his 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and that economy of movement forged during long night shifts. He reiterated Thaddeus's status in more clinical language, discussed the monitoring protocol, and asked if I had any questions. I asked too, not because I needed answers, but because I needed another 90 seconds before I could trust my peripheral vision. The pulsing at the edges of my sight began during the conversation with the nurse, that rhythmic narrowing of vision that follows prolonged adrenaline, giving way to sudden stillness. I thanked Dr. Gallagher, and as he turned back to the nurse's station, I walked over to a row of chairs against the opposite wall and sat down. Not because I wanted to, but because at 8 months pregnant, fueled only by preparation and cold composure, my body quietly demanded it. I gave myself 2 minutes. I counted them in my head. I breathed evenly, slowly, deliberately. Exactly as Dr. Kensington taught me. And exactly as I practiced in the underground parking garage 6 months ago when Gideon first told me what Thaddeus was doing with our money. Dashiell pressed once against my ribs and stayed still as if he too understood the value of a measured pause. Then I stood up, straightened my coat, thanked Dr. Gallagher once more as I passed the desk and headed toward the multi-level parking deck. Gideon was waiting on level 2 and with him the entire truth. Organized, documented, and ready for delivery. Level 2 was colder than the hospital. Underground parking garages in Atlanta have a specific atmosphere at 1230 a.m. Concrete pillars absorb the orange glow of fluorescent lights, humming just below the threshold of hearing. The air carries the cool, damp scent of motor oil and poured concrete, and a silence falls when most cars have gone home. My footsteps on the ramp echoed, highlighting the distance between me and every other person in the structure. Gideon Sterling stood beside his black sedan. A leather briefcase rested on the hood, his hands in his coat pockets. He looked taller than I remembered from law school, or maybe I'd just forgotten what people look like when a decade and a half of serious corporate litigation settles into their bones. When he turned, his face held the composure of a man who understands that the wrong kind of emotion at the wrong time only worsens difficult situations. He was my first call in April. Tonight, he would be the last. They breached at 1115, he said, skipping the pleasantries. Detective Silas Corcoran from the Financial Crimes Unit coordinated the raid. Corcoran's been building the criminal case parallel to our civil suit for the last 2 months. They had probable cause and a warrant signed by a judge. Over 6 months, I learned Gideon delivered information like a surgeon, making an incision precisely to the exact depth needed, without damaging surrounding tissue. What did they find? I asked. He unlatched the briefcase. Unit 14F at the Peachtree Residences. Cash. $3 million in various denominations already bundled. Deeds and transfer documents signed and notarized, moving 3 jointly owned assets from your name to an entity that cannot obviously be linked to Thad. 2 passports. He paused. One of them is not under the name she's been using in Atlanta. And the woman Gideon looked at me directly. Calliope Thorne, he said. Penthouse 9F, the Buckhead Estates. I let that address sink in. The way you let news you've prepared for hit you, knowing it still strikes harder than expected. The name wasn't a shock. Gideon texted it to me 40 minutes ago, and I had digested it during the drive. I could handle the name. But the address, Penthouse 9F, the Buckhead Estates, that specific detail found a crack in my armor. 2 floors exactly above my house. She had lived 2 floors above my son's nursery for 18 months. Every morning when I stood in my kitchen watching the light pour in, she was somewhere above my head. Every time I got into the elevator with my coffee and my growing belly, she knew exactly who I was, what I had, and what she intended to take from me. I exhaled once slowly. Tell me the rest, I said. Gideon reached into the briefcase and pulled out 4 gray manila envelopes, each labeled in his precise handwriting. First one, he said, handing it to me. Life insurance policy. $10 million. Taken out 3 months ago. Insures your life in Thad's name. The listed beneficiary is Thorn Holdings, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The paper trail leads to Calliope. He paused. Thad signed this believing it was collateral insurance for a dealership expansion loan she was helping him structure. It was buried on page 31 of a 4-7-page stack of documents. She slipped it to him during a rushed afternoon. He signed it blind. I took the envelope. A slight tremor ran through my fingers. Not fear. An honest physiological reckoning of what a $10 million bounty on your name actually feels like. I pressed it flat against my hip until my hand steadied. Second. He handed it over. Lab results. The bottles of vitamins APD secured in her condo tonight are the exact same brand and packaging as your prenatal supplements, but the contents are not. The state crime lab rushed the analysis. No folic acid, no iron. No DHA, it's entirely filler. She swapped your supplements for placebos, Serafina. You've been taking them for 4 months. I took the information and filed it exactly where I filed all the hard information over the last 6 months, carefully intending to use it later. The full weight of it would crash down on me only when I could afford it. Not yet. Third envelope, Gideon said. This took the longest. Before she showed up in Atlanta, her name was Evangeline Mercer. We tracked her through a social security number, linked to medical records from a hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, 7 years ago. SSNs don't change when someone changes their name or state. Most people building fake identities don't account for that. He looked at me. She pulled a very similar grift in Charleston in 2018. I've documented the connections. And the fourth, 18 months of emails and financial records. Search histories targeting Thad's dealer group. Public revenue data. LinkedIn activity. Corporate filings and condo board records showing she specifically requested a unit on the 9th floor with northeast-facing windows before she even toured the property. She picked the building after she found Thad. She picked the floor after she learned your unit number. I stood on level 2 with 4 envelopes in my hands, thinking about their weight. They were lighter than they should be. It struck me how little it all weighed. The complete record of what was planned, executed, and nearly finished. The kind of things that entirely reshape a life. It all fit into papers I could hold with one hand. I placed each envelope into my purse, carefully in sequence. Dashiell pressed against my ribs, once a firm movement, then stillness. Gideon. I adjusted my purse strap. When this is over, will Detective Corcoran have everything he needs? I want the civil suits ready to file. They've been ready for 3 weeks, he said. Good. I met his eyes. I'm going in alone. He nodded. I'll be in the main lobby. Text me when you're ready for Corcoran to move in. He's waiting outside with the warrant. Silence fell. Take your time, Serafina. Do it right. The corridor leading to C Wing was quieter than the main ER. Nurse Abernathy walked at a pace adjusted for me, and I kept up effortlessly. My purse rested against my hip. Everything I needed evenly distributed. Bay 14. That's where they put my husband. A hospital curtain, a heart monitor, and 15 years of marriage, reduced to a room number written in black dry erase marker beside the door. Dr. Gallagher was waiting outside Bay 14. Mrs. Vance. He said my name the way doctors do when they're about to add a caveat. Before you go in, there is something I need to inform you of. A pause. The woman brought in with your husband is in the adjacent bay. Bay 15. She requested her presence not be disclosed, but given the circumstances, I felt you had the right to know before crossing that threshold. He looked at me directly. What you are about to see might be difficult. He reached to his left and pulled back the curtain separating Bay 14 and 15 by maybe 2 feet. That was enough. I saw her. Brown hair catching the overhead light, a posture that betrayed the specific tension of someone acutely aware of their containment. And that sweater, a deep teal blue, the exact shade I had cataloged in my mind. The color I saw in the elevator of the Buckhead Estates on a Tuesday morning in July, a Thursday afternoon in September, and a Sunday evening 2 weeks ago when she held the door for me with both hands, smiled warmly, and told me how wonderful I looked and how close I must be to my due date. The same sweater worn 2 floors below where she slept last night, worn to the hospital where she was brought alongside my husband on the night they planned to flee the country. She was staring at the opposite wall. She didn't see me. Dr. Gallagher pulled the curtain shut. 5 seconds of visibility. He didn't say another word. He did what he felt was right, the only way the law allowed him. Thank you, I said. He nodded and stepped back. In that moment, I understood the difference between knowing and seeing, between carrying the truth in your mind archived and documented, and having it visually confirmed in front of your eyes on a hospital corridor in the early hours of Saturday morning. Knowledge is the mind's work. Seeing bypasses preparation entirely and strikes a place logic cannot reach. Nurse Abernathy stopped at bay 14. He's resting. The painkillers are active. He might drift in and out, but his vitals are stable. She pushed the door open. The room was dim. Just a single light panel above the bed. The green pulse of the monitor and the silence of a place where someone is held down by medication. Thaddeus lay on the bed to the right. His right forearm was wrapped in clean, white gauze. The hospital gown was standard too loose in the shoulders. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe hospital beds just reduce people to outlines. I stood at the foot of the bed and looked at him. 15 years. I slept beside that face for 15 years. I touched his jaw on winter mornings. I watched the slow math of middle age settle into the lines around his eyes. I believed I knew every version of that face. The version before me, now diminished, familiar in structure but foreign in meaning, was one I didn't recognize at all. It was the face of a stranger I happened to share a bed with for a decade and a half. "Would you like a chair?" Nurse Abernathy asked behind me. "Yes, thank you." My voice cracked for just a fraction of a second, then I pulled it tight again, like buttoning a coat against the wind. She slid the chair over silently and left. I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, but didn't open it yet. Dashiell moved a slow, arching stretch under my ribs. I pressed my hand flat against the side of my belly, not for comfort. As confirmation, we are still here, both of us, intact. I sat in the dimness, listening to Thaddeus's breathing, and waited for some version of grief or rage to arrive. Instead, what arrived was the same operational clarity that had been running the show since 1147 p.m. I turned to Thaddeus. I looked at his face the way you look at a diagnosis you've already accepted. I opened my purse, arranged the envelopes in the order I intended to use them, and waited for him to wake up. The monitor read 1:05 a.m. when Thaddeus stirred. No dramatic gasp, just a recalibration of his chest as the painkillers waned. His right hand clenched the sheet. His head turned slowly toward the chair. His eyes opened and found me instantly. There is a number that can change the meaning of everything that happened before it. For me, that number was $10 million, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For a moment, Thaddeus just looked at me. His expressions cycled incorrectly, confusion, recognition, then a clumsy stumble toward something that looked like relief. "Serafina." His voice was rough. He shifted, making a small, involuntary sound of pain. "Serafina, let me explain." "No," I said. He fell silent. "Not yet." I reached into my purse and pulled out the first envelope. I placed it on the edge of the bed within his reach but didn't hand it to him. An important distinction. I wanted him to choose to take it. "You signed this 6 weeks ago," I said. It was on page 31 of the dealership expansion loan documents. The header read, "Collateral Insurance Agreement." I paused. "That is not what it is." Thaddeus looked at the envelope the way a sales director looks at a volatile market measuring it, buying a half second. Then he took it, opened it, and pulled out the document. I watched him read. He got through the first page slowly. Then the second page. $10 million. My name in the insured box. Thorn Holdings in the beneficiary line. The blood drained from his face. It wasn't the look of a man caught in a lie. It was the look of a man who just discovered a hidden room in his own house and instantly understood what it held. "This isn't," he started. "Keep reading," I said. He did. When he lowered the document, the relief was entirely gone. "I don't understand this. She told me it was a standard rider. She said it was a formality. She shoved that file at you while you were fielding 3 phone calls. She explained it verbally. You trusted her. I let that sink in. It's all documented, Thad. The time, the calls, the specific language she used. All of it." He looked at the document again. "Thorn Holdings. Cyprus, Waite, Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands LLC's Hyde ownership," I said. "This company points directly to Calliope Thorn. Gideon Sterling confirmed it 2 days ago." Thaddeus dropped the paper onto the sheet. "This isn't an affair," he said quietly, almost to himself. The realization hitting his vocal cords seconds after it hit his brain. "No," I said. "She intended," I stopped. "Yes. She intended." I felt no satisfaction watching him realize his mistress was actively plotting against my life for a payout. Satisfaction requires a simpler reality. What I felt was clinical. I reached into my purse. Before I show you what was inside this vitamin bottle, something that made my blood run cold when I read the lab report, drop a 7 inches the comments right now so I know you're still here with me. Quick reminder, parts of this are shaped for narrative flow. If this isn't for you, feel free to click away. No judgment. I am not a woman who breaks easily. It's a structural fact about myself. But when I pulled out the second envelope, something inside me cracked. The envelope contained an evidence bag holding a vitamin bottle and a one-page forensic lab analysis on Atlanta Police Department letterhead stamped expedited. The bottle label was perfectly readable. Prenatal complete. Third trimester formula. The exact brand doctor Kensington recommended in June. The exact brand I took every morning with a glass of water. APD secured this tonight in her condo, I said. My voice was perfectly flat. Same brand, same batch number. I placed the lab report next to the insurance policy. The contents are not the same. I watched Thad as I read from the analysis. Sugar filler, binding agent, calcium carbonate, inert ingredients used to give the capsule the correct weight and texture. No folic acid, no iron, no DHA. I heard my own voice from a distance. Folic acid prevents neural tube defects in fetal development. Iron supports maternal blood volume and oxygen to the fetus. DHA is critical for fetal brain and eye development in the third trimester. Removing these from a pregnant woman's daily routine for 4 months creates a continuous invisible deficiency. Measurable in blood work, but undetectable in how you feel. In August, I continued. Dr. Kensington noticed my ferritin levels were low. She asked about my diet and supplements. I said I took them every morning without fail. She told me to eat more red meat. I did. I bought a second brand. I blamed my own body for 4 months. I placed the paper down precisely. I thought I was doing something wrong. Thaddeus didn't speak. He stared at the lab results. He stopped trying to manage the situation and just began absorbing it. She had a key made, I said. Gideon pulled the building management logs. A second key was issued to our unit in March under your name, but you didn't request it. Thad pressed his hand flat against his face, covering his eyes. He didn't cry. He did what people do when they have to sink into a feeling before they can find words for it. I did the exact same thing in my car in September. Dashiell, he whispered. The name he didn't know I had chosen, but he said it flawlessly because I had been whispering it to my son for 3 months and it had seeped into the air of our home. She could have. Yes, I answered. Tension moved across my lower abdomen. A long, slow band of pressure. I paused, placed my hand flat on my belly and breathed. In for 4, out for 6. The contraction peaked and faded. Dashiell moved once. 10 seconds, and it passed. I turned toward the curtain separating us from Bay 15. The partition wasn't solid. Sound carried perfectly. I spoke in a normal conversational tone because composure travels further than screaming. My son almost came into this world with a folic acid deficiency, I said. Not to Thad, to the teal sweater 2 feet away. Because someone I trusted touched my stomach and asked what names I liked while making sure those supplements did absolutely nothing. I let it land. I want you to remember this room. No matter what happens next, remember this. I turned back to Thad. From behind the curtain, I heard a sound. Small, involuntary. The sound of someone who just fully realized the trap had snapped shut. Thaddeus hadn't spoken since I addressed the partition. The monitor beeped steadily. I waited. Nurse Abernathy came in, checked the vitals, typed on her tablet, and left with professional neutrality. Then came the voice from Bay 15. Not a scream, not a whisper. The calculated volume of someone throwing their last card. Tell her, the voice said. A pause. Tell her I'm pregnant. It's Thad's. Thaddeus closed his eyes in exhaustion. I understood it. When a person has nothing left, they reach for money or a child. Calliope had already lost the money in the parking garage. So the child. I reached into my purse for the third envelope. Gideon had hired a licensed private investigator to track down her social security number. It led to a hospital in Charleston. I opened the envelope. The medical file from Charleston is 7 years old. The name on it is not Calliope Thorne. I pulled out the first document. Bilateral tubal ligation. A permanent surgical procedure blocking the fallopian tubes. Medically classified as irreversible. The woman who had this surgery cannot get pregnant naturally. I placed it on the bed. Then I pulled out the second item. A crime scene photo taken by APD in Unit 14F tonight. Silicone prosthetic pregnancy belly. Third trimester simulation. Found in the master bathroom drawer, hidden under a folded towel. I laid it on the bed. Thaddeus stared at it for a very long time. He was looking at the destruction of the narrative he believed for 8 months. He believed she was pregnant. It explained the passports, the rushed asset transfers. A man convincing himself he was running toward a future, not just escaping his present. The photo dismantled it in silence. I turned back to the curtain. The surgery was in Charleston, I said clearly. 7 years ago, under your real name. Silence, from Bay 15. Not strategic silence. The absolute stillness of someone out of moves. I turned back to Thad. I've held onto a name all night, I said toward the partition. The one you had before Atlanta. Before Buckhead. A pause. Evangeline Mercer. The name hung in the room. I turned to Thad. Gideon's PI found her history in Charleston. In 2018, there was a family. The husband ran a property management firm. The wife was a high school counselor, 29 weeks pregnant. A woman named Daria Kolsk moved into one of their properties, initiated an affair. Financial manipulation, a faked pregnancy, access to corporate accounts. The blueprint was identical. Thad didn't flinch. The husband was indicted, I said evenly. Convicted on 3 counts of wire fraud for transactions. She structured, but he authorized. He got 8 years. He's currently serving his 6th year at Broad River Correctional in South Carolina. I paused. The wife lost the baby. Acute maternal stress. She gave birth at 31 weeks. The child didn't survive. Her name is Rhiannon, I said. She lives in Mount Pleasant now. She teaches 6th grade. I called her last month. We talked for 40 minutes. She said she hoped Evangeline had finally targeted someone who was paying attention. Thaddeus closed his eyes. It was the look of a man who realized he wasn't the author of his own choices. He was just a supporting character in a script written long before he arrived. I grabbed the 4th envelope. 18 months of emails. Searches. Condo board requests. When you're ready to see the whole picture, it's all here. I placed it on his nightstand. It took him 11 minutes. At 1:36 a.m., Thaddeus reached for the envelope. He opened it and began to read. In Georgia, it is perfectly legal to record a conversation as long as one party consents to it. When Calliope Thorne sat on my couch and drank my coffee, I was a participant. I consented to recording my own living room. The dictaphone I bought in August sat on the 3rd shelf of my bookcase and recorded everything for 11 weeks. 6 of those conversations contained direct evidence of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. In one recording, she detailed the asset transfer timeline. In another, she outlined the escape plan to Dubai. Gideon handed these transcripts to APD 48 hours ago. Thaddeus read the 12 pages of transcripts. When he finished, he placed the last page down. She intended, he started. Yes, I said. And I was. Yes, a mechanism. A name on a policy. Whether you fully understood your role or just played it is a question the legal system will answer. It's no longer my question. I stood up. Gideon isn't just my divorce attorney. He coordinated with Detective Corcoran. The arrest warrant for Evangeline Mercer was signed by a Fulton County judge yesterday at 2:15 p.m. Do you have anything you want to say to me? I asked. Before this becomes part of the official indictment. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I'm sorry. One word stripped of salesmanship. I accepted it. I didn't reply. My phone vibrated. Corcoran is outside. Give the signal. I typed now. Before I tell you what happened when Detective Corcoran walked into that hallway type, I'm here in the comments. This is the moment 6 months of work finally landed. The corridor looked the same, but the weight had shifted. Detective Corcoran walked with the efficiency of a man for whom arresting people is a strictly professional endeavor. 2 plainclothes officers flanked him. In a U.S. hospital, executing a warrant requires coordinating with hospital security to minimize disruption. Corcoran exchanged words with a guard, nodded, and pointed toward Bay 15. Gideon appeared from the elevators. He showed his credentials to the hospital administrator, who stepped aside. Gideon took a position against the wall, observing. From through the partition, I heard the door open. Then, Detective Corcoran's voice. Evangeline Mercer, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. The Miranda warning. The words are the same in every state, every room. Listening to those rights being read in the bay next to my husband brought a profound, silent relief. 47 seconds of procedural justice. The door to Bay 15 opened. She walked out in handcuffs. She still wore the teal sweater. She looked smaller than the mastermind I had constructed in my head over 18 months. She wasn't crying. Her composure hadn't broken. It had hardened. She looked at me with the specific coldness of a predator whose hunt has been permanently terminated. I didn't look away. My legs were shaking just beneath the knees. The physiological toll of being 43 8 months pregnant and carrying this weight. I leaned against the doorframe of Bay 14 and held my ground. As she passed me, she turned her head and whispered something. 8 words. I will never repeat them. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed with absolute precision the sociopathy I had spent 6 months documenting. When they were gone, the silence in Bay 14 was final. Thaddeus sat up. Serafina, he said, his voice desperate. Please, for Dashiell. I reached into my purse. The envelope was standard size. I had sealed it 2 days ago. On the front, it read Alaric Pierce Family Law. I held it up to the door frame right at his eye level. Mr. Pierce will be handling everything from here, I said. I will contact your attorney through the proper channels. Do not call me again, Thad. Not once. Custody arrangements will be handled via counsel. He will have 2 parents. That does not require us to have a marriage. I stepped back into the hallway. I didn't look back. I am not a woman who looks back. Gideon was waiting near the exit with 2 paper cups of bad hospital coffee. He handed me one in silence. We walked out into the Atlanta night. The chill hit me instantly. I sat on a concrete bench near the entrance. Gideon sat beside me. We didn't speak for several minutes. I thought about the 15 years. The early days, the small apartment, the struggle to build the business. Those years were real, but they weren't enough to insulate us against what Thaddeus chose to become. Grief sat heavy in my chest. Gideon noticed my hands were freezing. He slid his warmer cup to me. You did everything right, he said. I know, but I'm still getting used to this part. The assets are frozen, Gideon stated quietly. Joint accounts, the real estate, the dealership shares. The judge signed the injunction this afternoon. The $3 million from the condo is held by the DA for the criminal case, but the civil suit is a separate track. Tort claims emotional distress battery for the poisoned vitamins. Your case is bulletproof. We don't wait for the criminal trial. We run parallel. I know, I said. 3 phone calls tomorrow. Alaric Pierce at 8 a.m., the realtor at 9, and Rhiannon at 10. We're done for tonight, Gideon said. I drove home alone. The 400 was empty. Buckhead welcomed me back in silence. The house was dark. I stood in the kitchen smelling the cedar wood, letting the memories of the good times wash over me, and then I walked upstairs. The nursery was glowing in the honeyed lamplight. The onesies were exactly where I left them. The needle was still pierced through the fabric on the upstroke of the letter E. I sat in the rocker and picked it up. It took me 40 minutes to finish the embroidery. Dashiell. 8 letters in pale blue thread. My hands were steady. I tied off the knot just as my grandmother taught me. I held the onesie up to the light, and then for the first time all night, I cried. Not a hysterical breakdown, just a quiet, involuntary release of pressure. A profound relief. When I finally lay down, Dashiell moved. A slow roll. We're okay, I whispered to the ceiling. We're going to be okay. By morning, I believed it completely. The next weeks moved in the measured rhythm of legal procedures. Evangeline Mercer was denied bail. The DA charged her with wire fraud, identity theft, and reckless endangerment for the placebo vitamins. Thaddeus faced no criminal charges but was suspended by his business partners pending the financial investigation. He received the divorce papers on Thursday. He didn't call. I signed the lease for a bright, sunny apartment in Inman Park. It smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I bought a crib and spent 2 hours assembling it on the hardwood floor at 11 p.m. I painted the walls a color called Morning Mist. I left one small smudge of paint on the window frame, a reminder that this room was built by human hands, imperfectly but with love. Gideon called on a Thursday. Civil settlement reached. Thad's lawyers agreed. $2 million transferred into an irrevocable trust for Dashiell. Neither of you can touch the principal until he's of age. Good, I said. 3 days later, Dashiell arrived. November 12th. Labor started at 2:00 a.m. 11 hours later at Emory Hospital, Dashiell Vance was born. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Loud and healthy. His iron was a little low as expected, but already being managed. When they placed him on my chest, I cried the second tears of this story. Tears of absolute, overwhelming victory. Gideon visited at 4:00 p.m. with a bouquet of zinnias and a note, "Welcome, Dashiell. Your mother is the strongest person I know." My revenge was never a plan. It was a promise I made to myself in a parking garage in September. I would not be a ghost in my own life. I would not shrink to fit a marriage that was lying about its dimensions. Vengeance was the weight of my son on my chest. A room built with my own hands. The documented certainty that the woman who thought I was an easy mark was currently sitting in a Fulton County jail cell. If there is one lesson here, don't wait until everything falls apart to know your worth. Don't carry it alone in silence. Tell someone. Family betrayal is exhausting, but it ends the moment you decide you are no longer a variable in someone else's equation. If this story moved, you leave a comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with me to the end. See you in the next video.